Instead, let's talk about direct competitors versus indirect. And this leads to a good Starbucks story. So what's a direct competitor? Well, I think I can give you a good Kuwait example. If you are a country, imagine yourself as a country. If you are a country and you sell oil, who is your direct competitor? The other countries that sell oil, right? And who are your indirect competitors? Well, you have to think for a minute. Who's an indirect competitor for oil? Well, solar power, wind power, hydroelectric power. Where I live, there are many hydroelectric dams that produce electricity. Those are indirect competitors. They don't sell oil, but they sell something that kind of replaces oil a little bit or reduces the need for it. So that's direct and indirect. So now we can go on. So Starbucks, believe it or not, had a direct competitor the day we opened. And you'd think that I wouldn't want to talk about that, but I do. We actually liked this competitor. We knew him. We feel that competition can be a good thing. And we liked it because we were in a new product category. There were no gourmet coffee companies in Seattle. Remember, I know it's hard to believe. You've got 70 Starbucks here, but there were none, and no coffee bars. So we felt that this other company was sharing the burden with us of informing the public and creating demand for a new category. And we thought that was okay with us. The other coffee company, fortunately, how shall I put it? They had weaknesses. And I'll talk briefly about three of them. The quality of their coffee was different from ours. It had a slightly different kind of taste to it because of the way they roasted. And that company didn't do very well, I think, and that was one of the reasons. They were trying very hard. The locations, we picked unbelievably good locations in the city that we were in Seattle. And we had a way of deciding what was a good location. And for us, in those days, the number one factor was we wanted to be near where people shopped, particularly people who had a little extra money. We wanted our store to be somewhere near where they went to buy their food. And finally, the other fellow, by the way, the competitor, wasn't that familiar with Seattle, and he made some mistakes in where he put his stores. We liked that. We thought that was fun. And then there's a question of product focus. Everybody knows that Starbucks doesn't sell a lot of things. You can buy coffee, you can buy coffee brewing equipment, you can buy coffee beverages, you can buy tea, that's it. The other competitor had two loves in his life. He loved coffee and he loved ice cream. So his company roasted coffee and sold it, and they also made their own ice cream. Well, that's pretty great, except it was confusing to customers. It's kind of a weird combination in the United States to be selling, pints of ice cream and bags of coffee, and we think that helped us. So there was a competitor that we thought was just wonderful. Competition can be a good thing, especially if people think you're superior. So I'd like to introduce you to a competition that's going on in the United States right now. It's sort of subtle, but it's, I think of it as giants in a movie fighting with each other. So Starbucks has 15,000 locations in the United States. And just like the ones here, about 5 times a year, they change the look of the store a little bit, and they do all 15,000 on the same day. It's amazing. So that's a lot of stores. And you would think that a company with 15,000 stores probably doesn't have much competition. That would be a wrong conclusion. They do have competition, and it's getting aggressive. I have some photographs for you. Oh, isn't this interesting? Over here, $1 small coffee, always fresh, from 7-Eleven. For those of you who don't know, 7-Eleven is a convenience store chain. It's very small stores. Most of their customers are men who, the joke is, most of their customers are men who rush in, get candy and junk food and coffee, and then go off to work, and they eat everything that they buy within 10 minutes. And that's pretty true. But they're having an aggressive campaign all over the United States featuring a $1 cup of coffee. It's not that great, the coffee's not that great, but boy, is it inexpensive. And they're promoting. The other two pictures are from McDonald's in the United States. McDonald's has 8,300 stores, something like that. Did I get that right? No, 14,000. They have 14,000. And McDonald's did something a few years ago that was pretty shocking. They installed espresso machines in every one of their stores. Now, I haven't been an executive of Starbucks for many years, but when I saw that, all I could think of was, what are they thinking at Starbucks headquarters today? You know, suddenly, McDonald's, with almost as many stores as they have, has espresso machines. Then they started promoting. Now, that drink on the right looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? But it's not a Starbucks drink, it's a McDonald's drink. So this is serious competition. As a matter of fact, some of you may have noticed in the paper here yesterday, in the Kuwait Times, there was an article about this competition, McDonald's versus Starbucks. It's not just me that's noticing it. These are direct competitors. We were talking about direct, and these are direct competitors, but they are low-cost competitors. So a person who really cared about the quality and was willing to pay more would probably go to Starbucks. But if you were an executive of Starbucks, you would probably pray that all of these competitors like this would just go away. So there are other competitors. These are also direct competitors. One of them is here in Kuwait, the Caribou Coffee. So these are, I just picked these. There are many competitors. These are, let's say, Caribou in the United States has more than 400 stores. That's a lot of stores. Pete's Coffee Company, which we'll hear more about later, 220 stores. Stumptown Coffee Roasters, which started in Portland, Oregon, has only 10 stores. But for the bankers in the room, Stumptown was just acquired by a venture capital firm, and that probably means it's going to grow a lot faster. Intelligentsia is a small company based in Chicago with stores also in Los Angeles. The interesting thing about Intelligentsia is their stores are extremely innovative. They do not look like Starbucks stores. They are from another planet, and it's very interesting to go there. But the message here is, yeah, Starbucks has lots of direct competitors. What about indirect competitors? And this is to help your thinking for your own business. Yeah, Starbucks has indirect competitors. In my opinion, Starbucks' biggest indirect competitors are Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And that's not coffee, that's indirect. So if you think about the amount of Coca-Cola and Pepsi that is drunk around the world, and especially in the United States, that's a big competitor. And you might say, oh, no, that's not the same thing. But if you think a little further, you'll realize that sometimes you have a Coke instead of going to a coffee store, and it really is a big competitor. As a matter of fact, this is just a cultural insight for you. In the southeast part of the United States, let's say Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, in those states, Coke is really popular, partly because Coca-Cola's headquarters, their world headquarters, is in Georgia. And partly also because it's really hot there. And in those states, it is not unusual for people to have a Coke with breakfast. You don't see that anywhere else, but in that part of the country you do. So I would say Coke and Pepsi and sodas are direct competitors, are indirect competitors of Starbucks. So you want the right competition for your business idea? I think that competition in certain ways can be good for business. There are direct and indirect competitors, and yes, even Starbucks has competitors. So just when you think you want to relax, in the hurdles race or as a business owner, you can't relax because guess what? There's another hurdle. So I have a question for you. This is a thought that isn't quite normal, but is there a possibility that some forms of government regulation are actually good for business? I mean, most people, those of you who own businesses must think I'm crazy to bring this subject up. We'll get to the answer. So regulations, you have to consider them. I'm talking about all the rules that govern businesses. You have to think about them if you're thinking about a business. There are regulations in every country in the world. There's certainly some here. I can think of only two things I like about regulations. Number one, regulations make getting into business more difficult. Or if you have a business, it might make expanding your business more difficult. And there's an expression in another Olympic track and field event. It's called the high jump, where you have to jump over a high bar, a real high bar. After each round of competition, the officials raise the bar. So there's an expression in business that sometimes regulation raises the bar, makes it a little harder. So if you have already gotten into business, you've gotten over the bar. One of the good things is that you've learned how to do that, and the next person who wants to open a company to compete with you, maybe they're not going to be as good at dealing with government agencies as you are. And so in that way, if regulation keeps competition under control, I like it. Number two, this is a very hard thing for business owners to accept, but I believe in it. Some forms of regulation make businesses better members of our communities. And it works, I think, to the advantage of the business owners sometimes. For example, in the city where I live, in Seattle, regulations force business owners to control their outdoor signs. You have to go apply for permits for the signs. They have to be a certain size in relation to the front of your business. You can't put signs just anywhere, et cetera, et cetera. And they also now control, in the city of Seattle, the type of packaging that you use. It has to be recyclable, because in some cities in the United States, garbage is piling up in our garbage dumps. So, and also noise is regulated. You can't make all the noise you want with your business because there are regulations about that. That's just, I don't know what the regulations are here, but I know you have them. One of the great things about these regulations, here's one. In the coffee business, the exhaust from coffee roasting, it has to be cleaned up before it's put back in the atmosphere. So one of the things about these regulations is that they make the business look like a good citizen, like the business owner thought of putting up beautiful signs instead of crazy signs, or that the business thought of using recyclable materials, or that the coffee roasting company thought of cleaning up the exhaust. And smart business owners lead the public to believe that. They say, oh, we're good citizens, because we're doing this and this for you, when in reality, it was a regulation that made them do it. But that's okay. That's good business. So if you are thinking about owning a business, but you don't yet, I want you to listen extra closely now. The question is, what is it that governments regulate just in general? not just here, but elsewhere. Well, they regulate business operations. For example, if you're selling gasoline or fuel, and here you sell it by the liter, and where I live, there would be somebody to come and check the gasoline pump to make sure that when it pumps 1 liter, it really is 1 liter. It's not less. That's government regulation of the operation of your business. There are hundreds of rules like that. Zoning. Today, when I was being driven around Kuwait City, I noticed that, for instance, manufacturing and distribution businesses are in one area. And that is a result of zoning. If you think that you're going to put your manufacturing company in a residential area, you're probably not going to be able to do that. Workers, oh my goodness, there's so many rules about the people that work for you. They're different here than they are where I live, but the truth is you need to know the rules about workers, not just what your friends tell you, but you have to go and find out what the rules really are. Then there's environmental regulation. This is a big deal in the United States. You cannot just do something that will damage the rivers, the ocean, the air we breathe, the water that comes out of a tap. There are lots of regulations to keep industry from doing those things. Buildings. Suppose your business needs a building. Well, for sure you're going to run into regulations, right? And where I live, it's an earthquake zone. There's an earthquake in Seattle about every 10 years. Sometimes they're a little serious, sometimes it's just an annoyance. But as a result, the city and the county and the state that I live in have a lot of regulations about that the building has to be reinforced when it's built because they don't want it to fall down. And then finally, in the United States, I don't know about Kuwait, there are many regulations when you want to talk to investors. I've done that many times in my life. I have dealt with investors, really often actually. And there are rules about what you can say to them and who you can talk to, because I'm sad to tell you, you future entrepreneurs, that you're probably a little too optimistic and you're going to tell an investor something that is not going to happen. And you are probably going to be tempted to sell stock to someone who is really not equipped to lose the money. And so as a result of things like that, where I live, it's regulated. So you have to be aware of government regulations. So know the regulations. Regulations raises the bar, but regulations can help businesses be good citizens. So where are we here? We finished the first group. We're a third of the way through the race. We've been going over the hurdles really nicely. We have not fallen like the man in the video. And now we're going to start the second group, group 2, which begins with the right amount of money. That would be the right amount of money to start your business. And there's the hurdle. They just keep coming, don't they? Hurdles after hurdles after hurdles. So I've got this great idea for us tonight. Let's rent a car, and we'll drive out of Kuwait City, out into the desert, and we'll go to Kuwait or someplace like that. And but I'm sorry to say we have a faulty fuel gauge in the car, so we're never going to know how much gas we have, how much fuel is in the tank. And that really sounds like fun, doesn't it? Going out in the night in the desert, not knowing where you're going, or not knowing how much fuel you have. So I have a Starbucks story for you that is exactly like that. It's about driving in the desert with a fuel gauge that doesn't work. And we, of course, did a financial forecast, and calculated the amount of money that we would need to start our business. And we did that, 4 decades ago. So, at that time there were no computers, no web, no cell phones. I know for some of you that would be impossible to imagine. I can prove to you that there were no computers. I'm going to show you a picture that was taken in 1974 of one of my partners. I don't think he'd be very happy if he were here today. That's him. That's Jerry Baldwin in 1974. You can tell it's 1974 at the top of the screen because there's a calendar. And I want you to look at his desk. This is what a desk looked like in 1974. And if you look next to his body there, you can see that there's an adding machine and a calculator. Where's the computer? There's no computer. So at that time, doing forecasts was a little more exciting. It was a little more difficult. And there we are about this a little later, a year or two later. Jerry on the left is getting married. Gordon and I are very happy for him. We're a little more mature now. The forecast that we did when we started was kind of a sort of elementary forecast, not as sophisticated as the one I would do today. But we got better and better at forecasting. And we stopped, driving out into the desert with a bad fuel gauge. We started knowing how much gas was in the tank. And you have to know how much money you need before you start your project. And I'm not talking about a plan that's full of words. In the United States, entrepreneurs are very fond of doing plans that are packed with words, thousands of them. I'm talking about a plan that is packed with numbers. Don't worry, we're not going to have a class in this right now. But I do want you to see what they look like. These are the typical ones that are used in the United States. On the right are what we call a cash flow statement, a profit and loss statement, and a balance sheet. They're composed in software that arranges the numbers for you. And over here is the interesting one. This is the startup expense. And these are numbers that would show you how much money you're going to need. And they show you other things too. They would show you whether you're profitable or not, how much money you're going to have at the bank every month, and that's all, and how much your company would be worth at the end of the year. That's very useful information. But this is a forecast, of course. It may come true, it might not come true, but it is at your best estimate. So a question for you entrepreneurs here, some of you out there. What if you don't like doing spreadsheets? You're a creative person, you've got a great idea for a restaurant, it's going to look really cool, people are going to love you. Well, I would say you need to do the financial spreadsheets to forecast, but if you don't like doing them, you can pay somebody else to do them. That's okay. Or you can take a seminar and learn how to do them. That would be good. But you need to know the numbers. You need to be able to discuss them, and they'll tell you how much money is required. Let's just look at one of the sheets, the one called profit and loss. Just want to give you a feeling for this. So there it is. This is the format. Every number on there is a 0 because it's just the format. You haven't done your research yet. So you do your research. This is a forecast. And then you enter the numbers, and it looks more like this. These are actual numbers for a company that I helped. We don't have to worry about this too much, but this sheet would tell you if your company is going to be profitable. It's not a hard thing to do. So what happens? Let's go back to the creative genius who just really doesn't like doing the numbers very much, and just want to talk about my business and the kind of car I'm going to buy after I'm successful. Well, I think I can give you a clue about what's going to happen to you. Remember him? That's what's going to happen to you. And that is not much fun. So my advice is do the numbers. it's a good idea to do the financial statements, the forecasts, and it's a good idea to know how much money you need, and it's a good idea to have that much money in the bank before you start. So Ali forgot to tell you when he was introducing me that I can read your mind. I'm very good at mental telepathy. And I'm hearing a message, from some of you, and you're thinking that forecasting is kind of a waste of time. And you have a very good reason for thinking that. It's because there's no way to tell the future. You can do the research, but it's never going to turn out that way, so why bother? Well, the truth is that you don't have to make wild guesses, which would make your forecast wrong for sure. You can do what we call educated estimates. It's not a wild guess. It's something you've researched. For example, a simple example, you're going to rent a space for your business, and on the spreadsheet, you have to write in what the rent's going to be. So you're about to write a number down, and instead, you call a friend who has rented a space like that and ask him what he's paying. And then you call a real estate agent and ask them what you're going to pay. And then you put the number in. That's called an educated estimate. And that would help you feel better about trying to tell the future. I can hear someone else. I can hear someone else. And someone's thinking, I'm just not a numbers kind of person. I just want to get into business. I want to remind you, you want to just get into business, that's you. So the right amount of money, use forecasting to determine how much money you need, and then here's a really great idea, have that amount of money in the bank. Very important. So we're sort of like business athletes, and we're running a race here, and what happens? Well, of course, you come to another hurdle. Forecasting. So we talked a little bit about forecasting, and this is about not me. Let's wait a minute here. Well, actually, I don't need that for a minute, so while they're working, I'll continue. So we're talking about the right kind of forecasting, and we talked about, forecasting to discover how much money you need with the hurdle we just went over. But I want to talk to you now. I'm going to try and help the entrepreneurs here. There are certain kinds of mistakes that are made in forecasting. They're pretty common. You might or might not know about them. So I'm going to list some of them for you right now so that when your friend who's helping you with the forecast comes back to you with the forecast, that you can look at it and see what might have gone wrong. So these forecasts are for you, remember. They're not the ones that you show other people. These are for you. These are the real ones. So the startup budget that we saw on the screen a few minutes ago, we're going to look at some of those mistakes in there in a few minutes. I have an example for you about finding a mistake and what to do about it. This is a Starbucks story. And when we did our first projection, we said 5% of our sales, that's going to be tea. We had wonderful tea leaf that we put in cute little packages. 5%, right? That's not much. 95% is going to be other stuff, mostly coffee, 5% tea. And we all agreed on that. But actually, our sales, in the first 6 months, 2% was tea. That was kind of shocking to us. We like tea and coffee, and people weren't buying the tea. Thank you for getting that up. So we did exactly what you would do. We tried to